Hello there, my name is Paige. A few years ago, I betrayed my sister, and I'm not proud of it. But trust me, what she did to me and my kids was much worse. At the age of 20, I found myself in a desperate situation. I was an unemployed single mother with my 2-year-old daughter named Alice living in an abandoned trailer. How did this happen? Easily. Step 1, fall in love and marry a selfish jerk and gambler. Step 2, wait just a little bit, and voila! When Alice was only 10 months old, my husband Oliver told me that he needed more space, and we divorced. Then he just disappeared and left me to deal with his debts and creepy moneylenders. After a while, our landlord kicked us out on the street, and I lost my job. I didn't have any friends because we had just moved to that town. Fortunately, my neighbor had a trailer. I was allowed to stay there for a little while. I could not even afford to buy food for Alice. The situation got critical, and I called my only living relative, my older sister, Kitty. We haven't talked to each other for 5 years or so. She's always treated me like a redneck. She was 38 years old and lived in Denver with her husband, Carl. Fortunately, Kitty got very excited and bought me a ticket to Denver. A handsome guy in his 40s met me and Alice at the airport. It was the first time I'd met Carl. He prepared a special car seat and toy for Alice, which was very touching. When we arrived at their home, Kitty was barbecuing in the backyard. She organized a party to introduce her cute little niece to all her friends and neighbors. Everybody asked embarrassing questions about my past, but Carl shut them up. He said that Alice and I could stay at their home for as long as we wanted. Kitty didn't seem happy about this, but she still nodded. During the next 3 months, life gradually improved. Carl repaid all my debts and helped me to get a part-time job online. Kitty enjoyed spending time with Alice. She bought her a bunch of cute dresses and toys. And then one day, Kitty took Alice to a playground without even telling me. I was running all over the house and neighborhood in a panic because Kitty didn't pick up the phone. After 2 hours, my hair turned gray, and I was ready to call the police. But Kitty brought Alice back as if everything was completely okay. I yelled at her and told her to ask me before taking my child away. But Kitty began to cry, and Alice joined her. When I finally managed to calm them down, Kitty confessed that she was infertile. Carl had dreamed about having a big family, and she felt useless. I hugged Kitty and asked her about adoption, but she pushed me away. She yelled, saying that I was selfish and cruel. This was the first time when I noticed something weird about her behavior. Meanwhile, Carl was getting more and more attached to Alice, and to me, too. We had so much in common and we talked a lot. Kitty was very jealous, even though I never allowed myself to flirt with him. One day, I was doing laundry. Suddenly, Kitty grabbed my shoulders and whispered that I should avoid talking to her husband if I wanted to stay in their house. Technically, it was his house, but still, I was very scared and followed her instructions. But when Carl left for a business trip, things got crazy. It was my birthday and Kitty had prepared a gift. She sent me to a spa hotel overnight and promised to look after Alice, because I deserved to treat myself and take a break from motherhood. Well, that trip almost cost me my motherhood. I got my hair and nails done, enjoyed a massage, and finally relaxed. But when I returned home, I found Kitty holding Alice in her arms. She was talking to a police officer and social worker in the living room. I asked what happened and tried to hug Alice, but the social worker, Tricia, invited me to have a tense personal conversation. At the office, I was shaking and crying. I tried to explain that my sister had promised to take care of my baby, but according to Kitty, she'd spent the entire weekend outside the city, and when she came back home, she found a hungry and neglected Alice on the floor. Can you believe that? Kitty lied and said that I had neglected my 2-year-old child for 24 hours. In addition, Kitty told them that I had raised Alice without a father on the street. Tricia warned me that I could lose my parental rights if the situation was repeated, and my sister had a really good chance of getting custody. I finally realized what Kitty was trying to do. I called Carl and yelled that I would fight for my daughter. Carl seemed very confused. He had nothing to do with Kitty's hustle. He asked me to wait for him to get back and to avoid any drama. When I returned home that night, Kitty was acting in a very passive-aggressive manner. She put Alice to sleep, sang her a song, and didn't say a word to me. Since that day, I began to take Alice with me everywhere I went. One morning we went to get groceries. When I was picking out fruit, Alice let go of my hand and ran away. I followed her, but it seemed like she just disappeared. I was running all over the supermarket yelling her name. Suddenly, I noticed Kitty outside. She was trying to put Alice in a cab. I ran up to them, grabbed my child, and started to yell at Kitty, and Kitty told me she was trying to protect Alice. That was enough for me. I realized that my sister was insane. I hurried home, packed our bag, and left to go live in a motel. Later that night, Carl returned home from his business trip. He came over to support us. I gave him the address of the motel because I trusted him. Carl told me that Kitty was overreacting because of her health issues. He promised to bring her to a therapist. When Alice fell asleep, I hugged Carl to thank him for his help. Carl was very shy, like a little boy. He whispered that he loved me and that it was killing him. And honestly, I wasn't surprised. I loved him too, but I still wasn't ready to admit it. So I asked him to leave me alone, but he insisted on taking care of me and Alice no matter what. During the next 6 months, I just worked from home and raised my daughter with a calm heart. Carl helped me to rent an apartment and provided monthly payments for child support. I met new friends, and Carl visited us from time to time. As for Kitty, she was ignoring me, and she never answered my calls. One day, Carl told me that they had gotten divorced. Kitty refused to visit her therapist, and their relationship just fell apart. He told me that he still loved me. I gave up pretending that he was just a friend, and we began to date. Soon after that, we moved in together. It was selfish, but I felt like I had finally found my soulmate. When we learned that I was pregnant, Carl proposed to me. We invited several friends to celebrate our wedding in a nice hotel in the countryside. Alice looked like a little angel, and my friend Sarah agreed to take care of her so that Carl and I could have our perfect wedding night together. Carl carried me in his arms into the hotel room and laid me on the bed. We began to kiss and undress, but suddenly I felt something weird, like a large animal was crawling under the bed. No, it was Kitty. She got out from under the bed and asked why we didn't invite her. We didn't tell her about the wedding on purpose, but unfortunately Carl's mother had blabbed to her. Kitty had lied to the hotel staff saying she was preparing a romantic surprise for her sister, and they gave her the key to the honeymoon suite. Kitty was very drunk and miserable. Her makeup was smeared. I didn't know what to say. But then Kitty noticed my pregnant belly. She began to yell at Carl and run all over the room, tearing up the wedding decorations. Then she tried to attack me, but Carl grabbed her. I didn't want her to harm herself or others, so I called the police and doctors, and they forced her to leave. That was the least romantic night of my life. When I gave birth to Willie, Carl was in seventh heaven. Meanwhile, Kitty was trying to apologize for what had happened at the wedding. She texted me saying that she was very drunk and upset. She began to send me flowers and gifts for the baby, but I sent all of them back. I was too afraid to let her close to the family after she tried to kidnap Alice. In 6 months, a very unexpected guest knocked on our door. It was my ex, Oliver. He told me and Carl that Kitty had found him and offered him money to kidnap our kids. Oliver is the meanest man in the universe, but that deal was too much, even for him. That's why he came to warn us. We asked him to provide evidence to the police to obtain an injunction and protect the kids, but unfortunately, Oliver had his own personal reasons for wanting to avoid the police. Carl and I decided to pay a visit to Kitty. She was acting very friendly and said that she couldn't wait to meet her nephew. I freaked out and asked her about Oliver, and Kitty denied everything and laughed. After that incident, Carl and I sold the house and relocated to a new city, and I wish I could say that we lived happily ever after. But last Christmas, we woke up in the middle of the night because someone had broken into our house, and it was not Santa. It was Kitty, wearing a Santa costume. We heard sounds from the living room and went downstairs. The entire room was covered with black mud. Kitty was holding Willie in her arms, singing Christmas songs and laughing, while Alex was playing nearby. Kitty noticed me and yelled that someone was a bad girl and deserved tons of coal. Carl had already called the police. Suddenly, Kitty grabbed Carl and kissed him on the lips. She called him her husband and Willie her son. Carl was trying to kill time until the police arrived. They took Kitty for a psychiatric examination. Today, my sister is undergoing treatment at a mental hospital. She has schizophrenia. I visit her on a regular basis, but she barely recognizes me. Kitty couldn't cope with the bitterness about her inability to give birth. She created an imaginary world in which she had 2 kids with her loving husband Carl, and I never existed. Of course, I feel very sorry and guilty, but at the same time, I'm glad that my kids are safe now. I hope she gets better someday.